What's up, Penn State fans? It's BWI Live for Wednesday, May 20th. That is Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We have a great show coming up for you today. We're going to talk about some anonymous Big Ten coaches talking about Penn State and the Nittany Lions' outlook in 2026. Pete Nakos, the On3 national college football reporter and insider, joins the show a little bit later to talk Penn State NIL and some other topics of note. And before we get into that conversation, we're going to talk about that whole NIL conversation and what it means when it comes to recruiting 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, and how it all relates to Penn State's class of 2027. T. Frank, welcome back to another show. We are off and running on the penultimate week of May, and Penn State football is finishing up its time on the recruiting trail. Only a few days left for these coaches to live in airport hotels, rental cars, and the like.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of miles on the body it feels like, because, just in general, you're crossing time zones. Like, it's not just the miles traveled, it's the time zones too. Like, that is, to me, that's insane as somebody who commutes 15 paces from the kitchen to the office every day after breakfast. So yeah, I imagine that will feel good to be able to be here. But then it's the high stakes game of official visits and trying to make sure you lock everybody down that you want to lock down before they leave the program. Because if they go somewhere else, who knows what kind of NIL offers they're going to get, what kind of smoke and mirrors other teams are going to talk when it comes to those kind of situations. And yeah, so there's never... It just is it's a changing world. It's never like, oh, things settle down for college football and staffs and recruiting. It's just like, what is the new level of grind? What are we doing this week? Got you muted there, Greg.
Hey, sorry about that, T. Frank. Yeah, at the end of this week, the coaches' travel will end. We'll have a brief dead period during the Memorial Day holiday weekend, and then the quiet period starts, which means recruits, as you mentioned, T. Frank, will come to campus in bulk for official visit season. We're going to talk a lot more about recruiting in a little bit, but let's get to some anonymous coach quotes. Athlon Sports putting out its annual article with quotes on every Big Ten team from anonymous coaches. It's a part of their preseason magazine. And so we look at these once a year when these come out. It's the latest sign that college football is not too far off in the distant future as we wait for next Wednesday when we should get the first 3 game times of the 2026 Penn State football season. But time will tell on that front. But T. Frank, let's get into this first quote. So these are all, again, anonymous quotes gathered by Athlon Sports talking about all the Big Ten teams. You can go read it over on their website. We're going to focus on the Penn State ones today, of course. But let's get into this first one here. Anonymous coach in the Big Ten, rather, says about Penn State, I don't necessarily know that they're going to be immediately good in year 1, but I thought the 3 big guys who followed former defensive coordinator Jim Knowles to Tennessee went for way more money than I would have paid them if I were at Penn State. So there was, of course, 4 that went to Tennessee with Jim Knowles and Anthony Poindexter. I'm assuming I'm not sure which 3 he's talking about, but the 4 that went were safety DeJuan Lane, defensive end Chaz Coleman, defensive tackle Xavier Gilliam, and I am blanking on the 4th at the moment. It's a great way to start the show.
Coleman.
But anyway, yes, you're right, exactly. So those 4 off to Tennessee. This coach thought that Penn State made the right call to let them go. Certainly those guys had reasons to follow them to Tennessee. Oh, Amari Campbell is the other one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So those 4 guys are there. I'm assuming the 3 he's talking about are probably Xavier, Coleman, and Campbell, but we don't know that for sure. But at any rate, when you talk about what Penn State lost there, it didn't look very bad at the time. It could end up being very bad a little bit down the road. We'll see. And that takes us into this second quote, T. Frank, about Tony Rojas coming from an anonymous coach to Athlon Sports. He said, I thought Penn State made a couple of really good ads. I also thought they kept a couple of really good players that could have left, like linebacker Tony Rojas. That's a really good player that probably could have gone anywhere for a lot more money than what he got at Penn State. So this is the theme of the show, money in college athletics, of course. T. Frank, let's go back to that time where we weren't sure if Tony Rojas was going to return to Penn State. Now, he did not have a full spring in
There was a time we thought he was a definite out-the-door kind of guy. That's the crazy part, based on his social media last year.
Yeah, and so I want to take you back to that time and what you look back on it, 4 months later, 5 months later now, what keeping him could mean to this program in 2026 and D'Anton Lynn's first defense.
It's important because I think they've got a really good blend now of high floor players and high ceiling players. Like, if you didn't have Tony Rojas in this room, I would say it's a solid linebacking core that lacks elite athleticism. And now it's got both. I think Caleb Bacon's a good athlete. I think he's got the ability to attack the quarterback and play, between two positions going forward. And then Tony Rojas has the ability to play between two positions going backward, so the will linebacker or linebackers in general, the best linebacker you could ever build can blitz. They can rush off the edge, which are kind of two different skill sets. They can play the run, and they're elite in coverage, right? So they can do everything. What they have is a good blend of those two at a similar position at outside linebacker, and then you got somebody super stable in Cooper Ebel in the middle. But if you didn't have Tony Rojas, I go, okay, who's covering tight ends? I don't necessarily know that I trust a lot of these guys on the roster coming from Iowa State, because they were built and asked to play in a defense that made them essentially like pseudo defensive linemen in the way that they had to interact with the defensive line. So speed and coverage skill wasn't necessarily 1A in their portfolio of what they can do. Now you got Cam Smith, Alex Tash, obviously a guy kind of for down the road. But Tony Rojas being here is a huge thing. And the fact that he mentioned, I think the little nugget in there is could have gone anywhere for more money than what he got at Penn State. That says that, the staff won Tony over and the place won Tony over, more so than it was a decision that they threw a lot of money at him. Now, could he have gotten a raise from what he was getting previously and also still be valuable, on a value contract compared to the open market? Those two things can be true. And so, I think it underscores how big of a win it was for Matt Campbell and the staff to be able to keep a guy like Tony Rojas as a culture guy too, one of the leaders of the previous team and somebody who's passionate and outspoken, even when fans don't like that. Given what he was talking about, in the when he was injured during the season, when everything was falling apart, it is interesting to see that behind the scenes kind of view at what the view of the roster retention was for Penn State.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. That linebacker conversation is really interesting, T. Frank, because I'm going to write about it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com a little bit later today. You wrote last night, we're talking about the Big Ten and coaches' opinions of Penn State anonymously to Athlon Sports. You wrote about guys that fans should be aware of that are in the next cut, the guys that are coming that we're not talking about right now. So you can see that article. You can see a conversation about the linebackers, all the guys recruiting scoop. Nate Bauer had a story up yesterday looking at this conversation from a schedule angle. And you can get all that over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Join for $1 rather, and then it's 50% off your first year for new members only over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For all that premium content, access to the Lion's Den, recruiting news, intel, and so much more. Join us over there. But I want to get to this last quote here. Go ahead. Yep.
I just wanted to give a quick plug to that article about the next wave, and I wanted to give a thank you. So what it is I reached out to all of the Big Ten sites we have, and then I tried to get all 18 Big Ten teams to give me one guy that they thought was kind of under the radar coming up next year. Because at this time, after the draft, what you have is you have all of the way too early lists, right? And so the way too early NFL draft conversation is really a preview of the upcoming season. Who are the best players in college football that are going to be part of the draft next year? But that's who are the best players in college football they're going to decide the season before they go to the NFL draft. And It is kind of silly in the fact that we don't know what we don't know. I always make the joke. It's like the sexiest man alive list, that it's just the sexiest man alive that we know of. There are people, there are billions of people on the planet, and not all of them are in Hollywood. So who are the players we don't know out there that are going to be influencing that list come September? And I wanted to get, it's kind of like a Big Ten preview. So if you want to preview some of the teams that are on Penn State's schedule with an under the radar player that you need to know now before we get to September, October, and November, you can go check it out. But it's for any team in the Big Ten that wants to check it out. And I want to say thank you to all of the reporters who, co-wrote this with me. They all gave a blurb, and I put it and I organized it, by who the player was and all those things. So it's a really good, I think, reference point if you want. We're in that kind of really early season preview. I hope that it's a good addition for everybody in the Big Ten to go check out.
I look forward to the Marshall Temple Buffalo version of this article. That's coming soon, right?
I think I might skip that one. Nittany Eagle Brad says, I'm not worried about the names, I'm worried about the talent. That's the point. That's what it is. It's like the name you need to know because they're talented, not because they're going to just be on the field. The hope was that, and not every team has an impact player that's going to be, a draft pick. in the spring. It's about whoever is going to be the opposing coach. Remember when James Franklin would sit down and he would list every player that they thought was impressive on film before the start of a game on whatever, Monday or Tuesday, whatever it was? Yep. A name you don't know that's going to be on that list. Doesn't have to be the superstar, but a guy that is not known right now because he's going to be good in the fall and he's going to be integral to teams that are, on the schedule or just in the conference in general.
Yes, and so give people an example. Who was your Penn State pick as an example of what this article is looking to get out about the Big Ten?
Yeah, so I'll say this because I wanted to get to this. Like Jim says, of course, they mentioned Rojas, the anonymous quotes. They could have mentioned Dixon, Kamaju, Howard, Goodman, etc. There are a lot of good players on the list to choose from of somebody that we don't know nationally that we should know. I just went with Darius Dixon at corner because of two things. One, his importance to the scheme and to, what we kind of beat a dead horse a couple of weeks ago, talking about it like 4 days in a row, talking about the defensive ends. Are they going to have a pass rush? And with that question, I just think Darius Dixon is going to be really important. Also, he was, a guy that stood out last year, had a really strong bowl game, and is on that upward trajectory of what we saw from spring football. It's more of a safer pick, I think, in terms of a guy who's going to stand out. He's going to see the ball come his way, and he's going to make some plays on it. And opposing coaches are going to, at some point, see him and his talent, and they're going to mention him. So, Darius Dixon was my pick as a young guy ascending into a starting role that should have a big impact that we're not talking about just yet.
Yeah, that's a good segue to our last anonymous quote of the day from Athlon Sports' anonymous Big Ten Quotes article talking about personnel. It says, I thought they did really well with their personnel. They obviously took a lot of Iowa State players. That made sense. They took pretty much that whole offensive staff and brought a lot of defensive players from Iowa State. That brings continuity throughout that roster. Your thoughts on that, T. Frank? Obviously, we all know very well at this point how many players Penn State added once Matt Campbell got here via the transfer portal, what that means for the roster, who they retain, so on and so forth, how many came from Iowa State, how many came from elsewhere, on and on and on. Offensive staff, as that quote notes, is mostly from Iowa State. Defensive staff is a mix of a bunch of different places. And so it is interesting on, that shift between the offense and the defense. But just your thought on that as we wrap up this portion of the show.
I think you can tell quote 1 and quote 3 are not from the same coach. So there's 2 coaches and 3 quotes, right? Quote 1 says, I don't know how good they're going to be year 1, but quote 3, really, if you put it all together, the blending of the talent from Iowa State and Penn State, whoever the anonymous coach is thinks they did a good job in terms of getting the right players from Penn State to stay and then bringing in the right players from Iowa State to blend this roster together. And I think that's a position we've had here of studying the team, and to hear that kind of from, and I'm trying not to just confirm my bias, but that's what it sounds like to me. Of they did a good job of bringing guys where it made sense for the continuity on offense, the familiarity on defense, and then it's going to be about blending that talent with Danton Lynn's scheme once you get especially those defensive players, into the same locker room, which they've been working on since, January and February when everybody got here.
Yeah, and that continues as summer workouts get ready to start here following the team's May break at the end of the spring semester. All right, let's get to the title topic, one of them anyway. Pete Nakos coming up, the On3 college football reporter, insider for On3 coming up in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk hidden gems in the Penn State class of 2027. So Nittany Lions, of course, have had a really good recruiting run in terms of continuously landing commitments. I was trying to count it up the other day, but I'm not good at math. But it feels like about 6 or 7 straight weeks at least of at least one commitment, if not more, for Matt Campbell and company in the class of 2027. A long way from the shows not that long ago where the conversation was about would they ever get their first class of 2027 commit. So like you mentioned earlier, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, just to prove your point, we're having a recruiting conversation on the Wednesday show, which normally we do football. But there's so much recruiting conversation that we're actually bringing it over here. And we've got a full show coming up tomorrow as well. So, yeah, there's been so much recruiting information in the last 6 to 8 weeks, or as you point out, however many weeks they've had a consecutive commit in the class.
Yes, no doubt about that. Well, I want to start with the first player on your list here. You can read this full breakdown from T. Frank over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But T. Frank, it's a guy who is now a Rivals industry ranking 4-star and just put up a really good track time. It's at the state tournament he ran in recently, and is a guy that continues to impress you and a whole heck of a lot of other people.
Yeah, that would be. So I wrote this before he was ranked, so I still count this one, but it is a good example of the guys we're talking about. Jameer Dean, Penn State's receiver, commit from Tennessee. He was ranked, I think, Monday of this week, or pretty soon around there, by ESPN as a 4-star. Basically, as I was putting it out, it was not even in the industry composite ranking that Rivals puts together for these team overall rankings. And so he's a 4-star for 247 and ESPN. He's a 3-star for Rivals, but he's an 89 3-star. So he's like right on the cusp of being a 4-star. And to me, like, I have a hard time when I see players like this not getting overly excited, not getting hyperbolic about their skills. I haven't seen a receiver commit that I like this much in a long time. I think we're talking Jaquaden Guilford is the only other player where I'm like, okay, that's a comparable talent, production, on-field ability, and I think Jameer Dean is in that conversation. He's a top 100 prospect to me. That's where he's going to land. So, yes, he's already made it, that 3-star to 4-star bump when he was committed to Penn State. He was not ranked by ESPN in our consensus rankings. He was a 3-star, just a general average. Basically, we know he exists kind of 3-star. And now he's in the top 300, just outside the 300 national ranking at 316. And I think he's going to jump even more as he progresses this offseason, as we get more information about him, and as he puts some senior film up. But to me, like, Greg, he doesn't even need more senior film. Like, he's good enough now. What was the 100-meter time?
I need to go pull that up, T. Frank, but it was quite good. Give me 1 sec. I'll pull that up for you.
I got that for you.
But yeah, so he put up a very good track time recently.
10.69.
Yes,
says,
you got it.
The AI. Oof. Yeah, yes. That's what he looks like on film too. That's the thing, is like, there was questions about his speed because we did not have information. And I think he developed, before his junior season to add some of that speed. And now you see it at 6'2", running a 10.69. We're talking about a guy that's going to run in the low 4.4s, high 4.3s. Holy cow, he's talented. Got you muted again.
It is just going to be an ongoing struggle today as I sit here and try and move things around and stop coughing. It's that wonderful time of year with allergies. But moving on, we're going to go to Minnesota linebacker Blake Betten, a guy that when he committed to Penn State, a lot of fans were very excited about. And he's continued on an upward trajectory since then in terms of what his outlook looks like long-term, both on the field and as a recruit in the rankings.
Yeah, and it's just important to know that there's no consensus in terms of the where these guys are in the industry rankings. And that's what I want to kind of focus on, because why this matters is Penn State right now, I think, has 5 consensus 4-star prospects in the class of 2027. And a lot of fans are, I think, understandably concerned that Penn State's getting a bunch of 3-stars. But what if these 3-stars are actually better than their ranking? I think a lot of people don't realize 3-stars come in a bunch of different varieties. Sometimes it's guys like Blake Betten who play safety, don't play linebacker, and are kind of in this development gray area where they're obviously talented. You look at him, 6'3", runs sideline to sideline. He's got family connections to the NFL. He's a kind of like, I compare him to Max Granville in the preparation and want to and desire category of a guy that wants to be great and has all the tools to be great. And at 6'3", 205, he's already preparing for that transition to linebacker. We have him in the on 300 as the 295th player as a 4-star. He's a 3-star in the industry rankings, which are what determine the team rankings. So Penn State is 15th, in the on 3 industry rankings. Not good enough for some Penn State fans. And again, I think that's fair. But if these guys get a fair evaluation, or where I think their talent actually lies, these are guys that maybe are ranked as 3-star, but their athletic ability or things that they do make them 4-star players. I think Blake Betten's right at the top of the list of somebody who's going to transition to linebacker and can play all 3 positions. He's going to be an outside linebacker, but the character traits, the personality traits, I think he can play Mike as well. I would love a defense. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm always trying to put wills at Mike because I want everyone to be able to cover. I want every single linebacker to run sideline to sideline. I want to be able to match up every tight end with every linebacker. I don't want weaknesses on my team. And I'm not saying right away, but I think down the road, Blake Betten could handle being a 235-pound, 240-pound Mike linebacker with plus athletic traits. Now, there's a long way to go between here and there, but that's what his talent on film says to me. And having interviewed him, you can check out that interview here on the YouTube channel. He's an awesome kid. He's got his perspectives all aligned correctly, and so like he's an easy one to bet on in terms of a guy that ranked right now as a consensus 3-star, as an 88 overall. He's a 4-star linebacker for sure.
All right, let's move to the secondary, where we have another guy who is currently a Rivals 4-star and inside the Rivals 300, but is not an industry ranking 4-star. Samaje Robinson, cornerback out of Fort Lauderdale, 6'1", 185 pounds. A guy you have scouted, of course, T. Frank, now that he is committed to Penn State. So Rivals, obviously, the Charles Power, scouting director of Rivals, and the rest of his team clearly have a higher view of Robinson than the industry, and it seems like you might as well. Why?
Because he's got great size and ball skills. There's a little bit of Amani Aruwariye here for Samaje Robinson. I think he's got, maybe Amani was faster, and that's really where I think some teams or some recruiting services have him a little bit lower, is he doesn't run a 4.3 or, a 4.4 in track times or whatever that you can composite into a skill. But at 6'1", 185, he's a big physical corner. And I think he can get more physical. That's an area of his game that can develop. But his vision, his IQ, his zone understanding, and his ability to eventually become a press man corner, I think gives you the versatility of a guy that's going to be a top 300 player in the Rivals ranking, guy who's 255th overall right now. And you look at players like this, and this is kind of, to me, what a 4-star means. Do you have NFL talent? Is it obvious that you have NFL talent? If you extend the metaphor of there are 32 5-stars and there are 300 Rivals 300 when there's roughly 300 players in the NFL draft every year, what we're saying is, like, are you a draftable talent? And Samaje Robinson, to me, is clearly a draftable talent. It may not fit every situation, every system, and he may not have that elite speed, but the composite skills here to me are a clear 4-star. And there's a development path where those skills compound each other and he becomes a very good corner. Now, again, all of these things are ifs and buts. There's not obvious locks. These aren't obvious 5-stars, which is why they're not 4-stars already. Like, there are conversations to be had about how the development track could go for some of these players.
Our next guy on the list, T. Frank, is a offensive tackle from Plainsville, Ohio, current Rivals industry and Rivals 3-star. But I just have a weird feeling the fact he checks in at 6'6", 265 might be part of the reason why he's on this list.
Yeah, and he did not play at that size last year. So again, this is one of those talent evaluation and decisions by the staff to go and get a guy that they see the ability to project at a bigger weight. He played around 245 last year. He's a really good offensive lineman. So from a technical standpoint, from an understanding of the game, effort, I think tenacity, the thing he was missing was mass. It's hard to say size because at 6'6" with an amazing wingspan, he's everything you want in a prototypical, I'd say, left tackle. Like, if we're picking who has to play left tackle of this group that they've recruited in 2027, I would say it's Tarawale. He's since gained all that weight. He's 265 pounds now. So what you see on film here, if you're watching the YouTube channel, by the way, subscribe here, like the video, all those things, super helpful. So people see, like, all of this good information. That's not on film just yet. And so when it is, he's going to be a 4-star offensive tackle because he's got the feet, he's got the length, he's got the talent. And I think that he is a high floor player as well. So I really like this commitment. I really like this football player. It was just about, like, projecting him to a bigger size, and he's put in the work. So, there's a guy that loves football, you can tell, because he's good at football, and all the other things are going to fall into place as he gets bigger.
All right, last guy on our list, and we're going to get to a couple guys on the bubble in this particular conversation. Yeah. It's the latest Penn State running back commit, the second one in this class, Odoh. Paramus Catholic, Plainfield, New Jersey product, 6 foot, 215 pounds, currently a 3-star across the board. You like him more than that. What stands out about his game, T. Frank? What does he bring to his high school team that translates to the college level?
So the first thing is all of these players are good at football. Like, I can see what they do on the high school level, and I know what translates to the next level. And I think that is a characteristic of this staff. They're not looking for projects in terms of guys that don't get it from a mental standpoint. We talk a lot about, the physical traits here, but just in general, Odoh is a really good player from a vision and anticipation standpoint. So his offense, there's a lot of pulling linemen. You can see here on this film, there are 2 linemen pulling. He knows how to set up these blocks. He knows how to cut in open space. He has good lateral agility, and he's a violent finisher. And what we, some of the things that are more difficult is if you see a guy that clearly looks athletic, but doesn't have the full what you would expect based on his movement skills. So he's twitchy. He's clearly a twitchy player, but he doesn't seem to have that like high-end breakaway speed. You learn that he missed the first 4 games with an ankle injury. So you can say he probably was playing banged up last year and he was not at full strength. So these highlights don't necessarily represent how fast and explosive he is. Then he runs a 10.86 100-meter dash. And so I think that all composites to a 4-star running back. Really good at football. He's big, he's violent, he's explosive, and now we have a little bit more confirmation about his long speed. I think he's a secret, I don't want to say superstar, but the secret sauce is all there for him to be a guy that surprises everyone as a running back. As a guy that I think was seen a little bit as the second running back in this class because he came in second and Aiden Gibson is higher ranked. I think they're comparable players. They both have similar offenses that they operate in, and they operate really well within their vision, their anticipation, their natural ability to run through traffic, I think are really similar. The only difference is Odoh does not catch the football in his offense, so we don't know how good his hands are. Aiden Gibson is elite hands for a running back coming out of high school. So just a really good football player and a guy that has more athletic upside than we saw on film. A little bit like Tarawale, but for a different reason.
All right, 2 guys on the list that are on the bubble for you. One is 3-star, both from Western PA, by the way. 3-star offensive tackle Ryan Robbins. He checks in at 6'7", 280 pounds. And then Pittsburgh Central Catholic corner Zach Gleason, who is 6', 170. Both 3-stars at the moment. Both guys on the bubble for you. Gleason just got an invite to the opening, which is good news for him. Tell us about these 2 guys, why they're on the bubble for you.
So Robbins is in a similar situation of I think he was playing with an injury last year, but I can't confirm it. And I tried to find that information, but like there's just a time limit on I'd love every article and every conversation, everything I know to be perfectly correct. But with so many things going on, as you mentioned, how many commits that they've gotten, it's one thing I just couldn't fully confirm, and maybe that information is out there and I just haven't seen it. But he's a guy that has explosive first step skills off the line of scrimmage. He's 6'7". He's got the full right tackle profile as in a mean offensive lineman and somebody that's going to dominate in the run game, and I think really good pad level and athleticism. But when he gets out into open space, when he's like having to run fully, I don't see what I see from Tarawale. I don't see a guy who is easily hitting all of his blocks and is just naturally getting there. And then for Gleason, and so that's an area where next year, if he comes out and he has way different open field skills and pulling and kind of getting to those levels, I think it's absolutely easy for him to be a 4-star tackle, and then Penn State has 2 of them. Also, I don't want to just be sunshine and roses and blowing smoke up everybody's butt. Not everybody's going to be a 4-star. Right. And some of the 4-stars that they have now are going to drop out once this reorganization happens for one reason or another. So it's not all perfect, right? And then Zachary Gleason. I really, really, really like Zachary Gleason as a football player. I just don't know how a 6 foot, 160-pound corner that does not have any one standout trait, like Samaje Robinson has the size, right? And he has this obvious profile of somebody who could be a prototype that we know works. Gleason is a bunch of really good skills that might all be B pluses. And so is that a composite 4-star of talent? I think he can play to a 4-star level in college. But I'm not convinced everyone will see that. It's a really good thing that he's going to the opening. I think that will influence this down the line. But I do think there are times against elite talent. You saw him against Joey O'Brien and some of the LaSalle receivers where he just got beat. Like he just got beat in a situation where it was talent versus talent of that dude was bigger, faster, and stronger than him. And so I don't want to hold like 4 plays against him, but they are a little revealing of this is a guy who is a borderline 4-star. I think he could be a 4-star corner, but I'm not going to say that Penn State's going to get 3 4-star corners in class and 2 of them are going to be under-recruited, under-evaluated guys, even, knowing I really, really like Gleason. So these 2 are on the bubble for me for those reasons.
Yeah, curious to see what Gleason does at the opening. He will certainly have every chance out there in Oregon to put his skills to the test, and that will either help his cause to earn a 4th star or keep it the same as it is right now. All right, let's get into, before we talk to Pete Nakos, though, we're going to let you hear about Way Fruit Farm.
Have you heard of Way Fruit Farm? It's this great farm market bakery and cafe. You can shop with them either at their farm in Port Matilda or downtown State College.
No way.
Yes, Way Fruit Farm. They have all sorts of seasonal fruits and veggies.
Way cool.
No, Way Fruit Farm. But anyway, you should visit their bakery and cafe. They serve amazing food all day.
Way
Fruit Farm.
All right, T. Frank, it is time for us to hear from Pete Nakos, the On3 college football insider, national reporter for On3.com. You had a great 20-plus minute conversation with him, talked Penn State NIL and a whole bunch of other things. So unless you have anything to add, without further ado, let's get to Pete.
Yeah, just one last thing is like it matters because they have to. These players that are under recruited and evaluated are not costing them a ton of money. Some of them may in the end, but here's the conversation about what's happening on the other side of that. We want to give Penn State fans the opportunity to see beyond what's going on directly with the team to some of the larger forces that are going to be shaping the environment in which Penn State football operates. And one of the people who knows the most about that in all of college football coverage is Pete Nakos of On3. Pete, part of the team here. Pete, love having you on the show. Welcome back. This is on me. It's been too long since you've been here. Thank you for coming on.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to start with something that doesn't necessarily relate directly to Penn State, but the Brendan Sorsby situation, I think, is a really interesting cross point of NIL and player movement, and also how gambling and everything has infiltrated all sports. This isn't just a college football conversation, but the money and all of these things from outside entities is kind of affecting the situation here. So for people that have not been paying attention, could you just tell us a little bit about Brendan Sorsby and what's going on with him right now?
Yeah, so Brendan Sorsby, star quarterback, hit Cincinnati, transfers to Texas Tech this winter, was set to be the starting quarterback for Texas Tech in 2026, has a lot of buzz around him, potential top quarterback pick in the 2027 NFL draft. It comes out in mid-April that he has a gambling addiction problem. He has since checked himself into a gambling rehab treatment facility. And from there's a lot of questions about what that means for Texas Tech. For Brendan Sorsby, Texas Tech has formally ruled him ineligible and filed for reinstatement with the NCAA. That's the necessary process they have to take if there's any chance of him playing in 2026. Meanwhile, he has now filed the lawsuit against the NCAA in Lubbock District Court. And we'll see how that plays out. And now the other factor here, too, is if he can't play college football in 2026, if things don't go well in the courtroom or with the NCAA, he might enter the NFL supplemental draft, and he needs an answer by June 22nd. That's when the paperwork is due with the NFL. So right now it is May 19th. Everything is kind of on a timeline. So this court date's going to have to get set quickly. The NCAA investigation has not ended. At least that's what the NCAA said in a statement yesterday. So that's kind of where things are at. And meanwhile, Texas Tech is moving forward with Will Hammond, their backup, coming off a torn ACL. He's supposed to be ready by August 21st for like full-blown football activity. We'll see what the start of the year looks like for him. But major storyline this offseason with a Texas Tech program that is on the rise, coming off a CFP appearance, and seem to be on track to do that again this year. We'll see what the quarterback position does to that.
And I'm not asking you this question in terms of like direct knowledge, but it's just kind of a next question in my mind is what happens to all that money that he was given and you know, for signing with Texas Tech if he's not eligible to play? Like, how does all of this stuff work itself out? Because, you know, when you're setting the market and, you know, you're paying top dollar for a quarterback and all of these things influence other programs, and then the guy is ineligible. Like, I'm just curious what you think is how all of those things play out, the ripple effects of all of this.
Yeah, so when he committed to Tech in January, we reported that deal was over $5 million. And just from talking with sources and stuff, it sounds like the deal's broken up into a couple different agreements that come up with that total sum. Listen, he is not officially, you know, there's still a chance he can play in 2026 for Texas Tech. So nothing about the contract has changed to this point. Now, if things change in the next, 4 to 5 weeks, maybe some things with the contract can change. But yeah, nothing has changed financially there just yet.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation, but it gives us a good transition point to talk about how a lot of this stuff does relate to Penn State, and that is through the NIL cost of acquisition of talent. We'll get to the quarterbacks and the free agent aspect of this through the portal in a minute, but you wrote a great article about pulling back the curtain and finding out how much it actually costs to sign 4- and 5-star players out of high school. So can you just take us through some of the how this came about, how you kind of worked through this, and some of the numbers that you found relevant in this research you did?
Yeah, we have done it in the past with the transfer portal and with May here and high school recruiting kind of taking center stage. I thought it was important to lay out how much it costs to get a top-tier quarterback and a top receiver and a top edge rusher and things of that sort. And I think everything is so whispers-based recruiting. I don't know if mainstream recruiting has exactly caught up with NIL, but so much of decisions made now in high school recruiting has to do with money. And it's not the only thing, and my job isn't to think it's the only thing, but it really does play a big part. So, we took it on. I thought it was important to try to put some numbers out there and see where the market's at going into official visit season. For me, I didn't think a lot of the numbers were surprising. The wide receiver market continues to go up, and that's kind of tied to what Jeremiah Smith did to the market when he came into college. And then, the price for a top-level offensive tackle and pass rusher is always going to be pushing the $1 million mark. I think the top market right now for an edge rusher, you're looking at 1.5 to 1.7. And then, we're talking about like a 5-star quarterback here, top 10 quarterback recruit. That's over the $1 million mark in year one when they're a freshman in college. And that number isn't surprising because when a program takes on a quarterback of that caliber, that's kind of their bet to be their starting quarterback in the next 2 to 3 years.
It's interesting. Penn State just went through this conversation, and we have had the nuanced discussion about Will Wood and Peter Bork here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel here in our BWI live show on Thursdays of Penn State, beyond just the money, decided in the end that they wanted to pursue Will Wood, but the money is not an insignificant part of this conversation. Peter Bork is a top 10 quarterback, so I mean, those numbers kind of put into the discussion how much it was going to cost for a guy. And Pete, this is from the football side of things where you mentioned he's going to be your quarterback the next 2 to 3 years, but you might not be paying your starting quarterback that much money. Or if you are, now you're paying that position for 2 starters and you're getting nothing out of that player that's on the bench for a certain period of time. So there's a sunk cost to it. There is a kind of the doubling down. Quarterback is obviously an important position, but this puts a lot of coaches in a bind when it comes to how do you build your roster and how do you build for the future. Have you had those conversations with people who don't have those checks that are trying to figure out how to do all of this?
Yeah, it's tough. And the $1 million mark for a high school quarterback sounds high, but the reality is the starting quarterback market, you're looking at anywhere from $3 to $6 million right now across the Power 4. So $1 million is definitely cheaper than that. Listen, at the end of the day, outside of those, line of scrimmage positions and maybe an elite skill player or two, so much money is always going to be tied into your quarterback room. That's why when we talk about the NFL and we talk about the most important position, we talk about quarterback because so much money is tied in there. That's the same thing in college today too. So, but those are tough decisions to make for coaches, right? And why should I place a financial bet on a high school recruit to pan out when there's such a high chance that it could not work out and things like that? And that's why, and we keep talking about this in the Penn State lens, but there's a lot of programs out there now who would either prefer to go all in on a top 5 quarterback talent out of high school and play them immediately to get the experience so they're better in years 2 and 3. Or there's other programs out there, too, who would prefer to just completely pass on high school recruiting at the quarterback position and just continue to pay, that top tier $4 to $6 million for a quarterback out of the portal every year. And that's what Miami's doing, and it's been quite effective.
So this actually is taking on more of an NFL model than I thought. What you're describing is the rookie contract and playing your rookie quarterback because you're saving on what it costs to pay a veteran. And obviously you're going to renegotiate at some point when that quarterback becomes, better at football. But still, that is versus actually going out and paying a franchise quarterback numbers out on the market. And I mean, it's a gamble on the NFL level, and Pete, it's a bigger gamble for kids that are 18 that are learning football at the same time. Like,
For sure.
you know, in the NFL, you got to be an expert at it, but like you might not have ever seen certain things in football in your life if you're coming into college and playing as a true freshman. This is a wild situation to be in.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you know, it's interesting because 2021 happens and NIL happens, and we're all like, oh, it's getting closer to the NFL model more and more. And now 2026, we're, 3 months out from the season, and college football today looks more and more like the pros than ever before.
I want to ask you, and I hate doing this because I don't want to what about and not ask you something that isn't on your article, but I do find it interesting talking about the NFL. You have quarterbacks, running backs. Keemon Spell was in your article, a Penn State target and Pennsylvania player. Offensive tackle. There's receivers, edge defenders, and D-line in general. Corner wasn't on your list. Is that a team building thing? Because in the NFL, corners are highly paid, and that's the only reason I ask is because if we're talking about these team building decisions, is corner a position where you can find value there, or is that something where it was just kind of in the nuts and bolts of how you made the article that didn't particularly come up?
I think I tried to group defensive backs together, just because cornerbacks and safeties in the college game, and obviously it's very specific to what kind of defense coordinator wants to run. But you have situations where safeties are more highly valued, cornerbacks are more highly valued. Trust me, at the end of the day, I mean, both those positions still can command high monetary values. At the same time, too, I think that if you go through the portal, there are so many cornerbacks available year after year where, I mean, listen, if there's a Caleb Downs type player, they're obviously going to command the kind of money that is like top 10 in the country. At the same time, there's so many depth options in the portal in the secondary too that some money can be saved there. Excuse me.
Gotcha. I think that we're finding some of the differences too, kind of in the two models, and I don't mean to keep harping on this, but it is interesting of like, we talk about the NFL as a model, like, but without a cap, this is baseball. And so like you can pay any position, any player you want if you think they're valuable, but where are you going to find the value? And in college, safeties being as valuable as corners is super interesting. And I think that probably has more to do with the rules and the field than it does, the skill at the position. But of course, like I think Penn State fans love this about me is that I dance around the main question here. But this was all a setup to give you the lay of the land and understand where Pete Nakos is coming from, looking from a national perspective of these are the numbers, this is how all of this is working. And now I got to ask you the $1 million question, or maybe 1.5, depending if we're talking about an edge defender. Where does Penn State fit in this NIL market when it comes to recruiting?
I think you look at a Penn State program that is well positioned to win over recruits with Matt Campbell. I think you're also looking at a Penn State program that is not a top spender in high school recruiting. And that was the case under James Franklin. That's going to be the case under Matt Campbell unless that budget goes up. And I'm not saying they're not going to get a 5-star or a very high 4-star, but I'm also saying too that the money, it does not line up for them to get 5 stars the way Texas A&M is this cycle.
Yeah, it's been part of, this class of 2027. I think there's guys out there like, as we're talking about here, Khalil Taylor is a top in-state prospect. Maxwell Hiller was a 5-star that early they were in on with. And these are some of the conversations about, like, why isn't Matt Campbell landing any of these guys? And there is this perception of Matt Campbell coming from Iowa State as a guy that did not have good recruiting chops because of I'm saying this is the perception of Matt Campbell, is that he wasn't a good recruiter because of their average recruiting ranking over the last decade, without considering that it was at Iowa State and then considering the results then later. But there is this perception, I guess, of the baked in of Penn State being what you mentioned of I guess the view of where Penn State is in the pantheon of college footballs and football and places you think would spend versus the realities of the situation. And, there's not a question at the end of this. It's just a fascinating situation, Pete, of, you meet perception and reality in a bunch of different places when it comes to NIL and recruiting.
The one thing I'll just jump in here and say, and you might laugh at me because you feel like I'm beating a dead horse as someone who doesn't cover Penn State all the time. I think the one thing Matt Campbell brings that I would get excited about if I was a Penn State fan is I know he has a heck of a track record developing players no matter what their star rating is. So if I'm Penn State and want to win a national title, yeah, do I feel like I need to get 5 stars? Yes, but I also know in the back of my head somewhere, that Matt Campbell can develop maybe like no other head coach in the country, or at least in like the top percentile next to some Kirby Smart and Ryan Day and Dabo Sweeney and options like that. But I just would feel very confident about what Matt Campbell can do.
So any other Penn State thoughts? Because I want to transition to some of these bigger picture items that we talked about, kind of with where things are going, that you think is interesting, whether it's NIL or not, when it comes to Penn State and their positioning within all of this. Because it's not just about recruiting, obviously, the portal and you know, some of the other aspects of, you know, they're building a stadium. I just anything I should have asked you about Penn State that I didn't so far.
No, I don't think anything. The last thing I was going to add on the cornerback safety talk that we had was just, I think, if you can get like a playmaker, a difference maker in the secondary, I think sometime in the college game, it's regardless of if they play safety or cornerback. I just think if you can have like a shutdown cornerback or an elite safety, if you can get like one of those two, like I think it changes the makeup of what your secondary looks like.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Okay, so there's another situation developing. All of this has to do with, do you have a law degree, Pete?
No.
You cover so much law stuff. I was just curious if you had any legal background.
My brother just graduated. He's a JD as of
oh, well, that's a good resource to have for you.
Ago. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Congratulations. It's big time of year for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Playfly and Nebraska are in a situation where they had a deal, and you can probably set this up better than I can, where they had a deal between Playfly, which is a media rights company, I believe. Like Penn State obviously has a relationship with Playfly as well. They're a national brand that does a lot of this stuff. And it was denied through the NIL Go portal. Do I have those facts correct? And can you just tell us if I'm wrong, like, what is going on with some of these, what feel like ways to circumvent NIL, it seems like?
So I think the best way to understand this is, right, the transfer portal is in January. Everyone signed retention contracts in December. In those moments, nobody is thinking, oh my gosh, can I get this deal through the clearinghouse? No, the Big Ten and SEC and ACC and Big 12 schools are all thinking, how much money is it going to take to get this player on my campus so I can have a better roster in 2026? But now you arrive at this predicament, this situation where some of the money tied up to get that player to campus, you know, is going to have to go through the clearinghouse, and how you package it and how you get it through might not get through. And I think there's about $100 million plus that still has not been approved. I know a lot of that is from the Big Ten and SEC. People are saying that they're not following the CSC rules, and the ACC and Big 12 are. I'm here to tell you that I just think it's that some of the most expensive rosters in the sport are in the Big Ten and SEC, and I think that's just the nature of the beast.
Okay, so the clearinghouse has to approve all of these deals, but they can't approve them in real time, I'm imagining. So how does So it just seems like this is a situation that isn't really functioning right now.
So let's break it down. So you know, every school right now in the P4 has about like 13 to 16 million, give or take, that they're spending on revenue sharing. So if you have a $40 million roster and 16 million of it is coming from the schools, you know, the revenue sharing fund, then the rest of it is coming from outside deals, whether it be a Playfly deal, a deal with, you know, the local Coca-Cola distributor, that's, you know, like the local business that's helping pay for the roster, or it's coming from the NIL collective of sorts, which is packaging the deals through a brand deal that might be happening too. So, I mean, there's all kinds of funds that are coming through to pay for the rosters.
Okay.
And those deals, whether it be like the MMR deal, whether it be the collective deal, whether it be a brand deal, things like that, what the NIL deals per se that aren't revenue, they have to go through the clearinghouse. Any deal over $2,000.
Okay, and I guess I have to ask the question is, like, does this have to be settled before the season? Are players ineligible? Like, how do all this actually
so
translate
nobody's
to the
ineligible field? Unless the deal is denied and the athlete still takes the payment. So that's the only way someone would be ineligible. Now, at the same time, you know, like if let's just say a Power 4 quarterback was signed a contract where $4 million and $1 million came from the school and $3 million had to come through outside revenue sources. And of the $3 million, let's say $1 million has been paid, but there's still $2 million that needs to be paid out. And some of it is stuck in the clearinghouse. I guess you could be put in a position where a quarterback says, I'm not going to play until I get paid. I'd also tell you that this is college football, and a lot of the players playing have dreams playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
And missing game time probably I would say that doesn't outweigh getting paid if you've already been paid a couple $1 million. So I don't want to speak for an athlete in that situation. I just think the more you scheme it out, the more interesting it gets. And I'll tell you this too. I mean, I put this in a story before too. There's schools out there who are paying well above the cap and are not putting deals through the clearinghouse because they don't want to be put in a situation where a player doesn't want to play. And that's happening in basketball. That's happening in football. We hear about, I report on these massive rosters. I'd be lying to you on here if I told you that every one of those deals ever paid out have gone through the clearinghouse that are non-revenue sharing.
Well, it sounds like, not intentionally, but you can have just a bunch of fake numbers. If you say, like, I'm going to promise you $4 million, but I can only guarantee $1 million of it, and then suddenly roster valuation for a player shrinks because the money doesn't actually show up. I mean, that's just one theoretical part of the conversation. And I guess, where does all this go? That's really the question I want to know, is just like, okay, so that's how it's working, or maybe not working for some people. Where does this go? Because this, again, just a lot of these things feel pretty unsustainable, and we're in a really unsustainable time when it comes to the amount of money that these rosters are commanding versus the money that is there to pay for them. I know the SCORE Act has been a part of this conversation. Where do you view where we're going in the next, I want to say year, Pete, but the last time you and I were talking, things are very different than they were. We're in a very different situation than we thought. So 6 months, could you give me 6? Is it 3? Like, what's the future and what's the horizon? What's the time horizon?
So there's a lot of big conversations happening. There's some threats being lobbed that maybe certain conferences will break away from the NCAA. I'm not going to rule anything out, because it is college sports and things do change so quickly. What I would tell you, though, is that there was a signed settlement agreement to put the clearinghouse in action. Now, the people who put the clearinghouse together don't exactly love what the clearinghouse is doing. So I think that the College Sports Commission, which runs the clearinghouse and NIL, go sit in a very precarious position. I would tell you that it's definitely going to get tested the next, 6 to 12 weeks. There was the Nebraska situation where the CSC won the arbitration against 18 Nebraska football players for over $1 million worth of deals that were put through a multimedia rights contract. But those athletes are now resubmitting their deals through NIL Go in the clearinghouse. And from everything I've heard, if those deals are approved, I would think that will be the end of that situation, and then the Nebraska State Attorney General won't get involved. So the SCORE Act, and pivoting, sorry, I'm saying a lot of things. So the SCORE Act is probably not going to move forward. It was taken off the books. It was supposed to be up for a markup to the House floor this week. That's not going to happen. The best chance that college sports leaders have of congressional action is going to be bipartisan legislation, which is going to come from Senators Cruz and Cantwell. They're in the final stages of negotiations on that legislation from some people I spoke with last night. We will see. There's a lot of hope. I will also tell you that we're in a midterm year. I'm putting in my political junkie hat now. There's a summer recess that begins in August, and then all of a sudden it's midterms. It's supposed to be introduced this week. We'll see if it gets pushed back as negotiations go on. Let's say it gets introduced, though, in the next 10 days. If it doesn't move forward significantly in the next 8 to 10 weeks before that August recess, I have a very hard time believing that we're going to see any college sports legislation in this year. So
because they're going to be focused on keeping
midterms.
Their jobs, or
So we're officially on the clock. And meanwhile, there's all these kinds of conversations about the future of the clearinghouse. If the Big Ten and SEC want to stay in the NCAA, I think that conversation is much more layered and more complicated than it probably even sounds. And at the same time, too, college football is going to kick off in like 12 weeks. And, so
So on the one hand,
do I care about the college sports legislation and the future of the NCAA model and things? Of course.
Yeah.
I also just try to spend a couple hours a day thinking about football because that makes me happy.
right. And next time we got to talk about football. We got to actually have the conversation about the actual game. You just know so much of this stuff because like what you've detailed basically is on the one hand, there might be legislation that makes it look even more like the NFL or whatever. It might actually provide some structure. And on the other hand, we might just have Premier Soccer. Like those are the two things that could happen. Also, kickoff is in September and all of it or none of it might happen within that timeline. So, wow. Pete, thank you. This has been very illuminating. Appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, you bet.
Pete Nakos, everyone, the On3 college football insider, national reporter for On3.com. Really good conversation there with T. Frank about all the things going on in college football besides what happens on the however many fall Saturdays here at Beaver Stadium and or another venue during the fall, or the official visit weekends that happen here in a couple of weeks, or the transfer portal window that happens earlier in the year, all of which could be changing at some point down the road, as Pete and T. Frank discussed, maybe sometime soon, maybe sometime not soon. I'm with him. For the record, T. Frank, like I have a really hard time thinking anything gets done prior to the start of next year at this point. So it comes down to where this clearinghouse stuff goes in the next few weeks, months, I guess. It is May 20th, so we're not that far away from the start of preseason camp. There's time to change some things, but it is also college football. My one biggest takeaway from not just Pete's reporting, but your conversation with him here on the BWI YouTube channel is that it's very college football to be this close to kickoff. And I know, again, if you looked at the actual number of days, it's not like it's right around the corner, but it's closer than you think. And they're still having these conversations.
How long is it until we
rules.
have the countdown, Greg?
Right.
Like, you do the 99 days and you got player number 99 who wears 99.
Right.
How far are we from that? Because we got to be getting pretty close.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you here. 108, so we are very close.
We're almost there next week.
Yes, so right around the corner it is. So, T. Frank, really good conversation with Pete. Any other thoughts you had following your chat with him?
Yeah, I appreciate his time. He wants, after we were done talking, he wants to talk about Rocco Becht. So we're actually going to have him on maybe next week. We're gonna get together. We're gonna have another conversation. I really like Pete. I think he does a great job, and he has really clear information. So it's helpful for us to have that resource here. And I just want to thank him again for being on the show. The Super League thing is not good for Penn State. Like, I think Penn State fans think it is because, we are Penn State, but you are not spending at the level of $40 million. Like, if you want to be at the bottom of the Premier League, okay, like, that's probably where you're going to be based on spending right now. So I don't think that's what you want to be rooting for. I think just some notes I'm cleaning up. I was just watching my game film. The deal things are so confusing. I said I butchered the Nebraska situation, but I think that's also the point. Like, nobody knows what the hell's going on. And there's all of these different ways that deals are going through, and people are just like, I don't care about the clearinghouse. We're just going to do what we want and make this simpler. And so, like, this is what we thought was going to be a good check on everything has just turned into a speed bump and a traffic stop that a lot of people are ignoring. And then from the Penn State side of things, Penn State gonna have to pay for a portal quarterback next year. One way or another, they're gonna have to pay for a portal quarterback next year. And with the numbers he was just talking about, how are you finding the value there? Like, are you gonna be able to find a quarterback that you can say, hey, come compete for a starting position with Alex Mansky, while paying whatever it is that's commensurate with that particular position on the roster? And then the reality that you can't spend $1.5 or $2 million on a quarterback and then say, sorry, you're our backup. Like, there are all of those things that go into this. Like, in the NFL, the owner's like, no, we paid for this first-round draft pick. Like, we picked him. We're playing him. Or we paid for this player. Those economics do, as much as you don't want them to as the coach, like, they do matter in the situation when it comes to who's playing and where you've invested your money. The last thing is, and I'm sorry, we're going to go a little bit long, Greg. I'm trying to condense all these things, but it's just there's some fascinating things I wanted to follow up on when it comes to Penn State and what we've seen since NIL has really, and like going back to James Franklin's time, since NIL has really started influencing and inserting itself into recruiting. Where was Penn State winning? Tight end, running back, linebacker, and they tried to steal some linebackers as edges, right? Tried to do that conversion and get an edge for a value. But players, the one value position that they were winning without the massive spend was offensive tackle and filter out wide. And so everything else makes total sense if you look at where they were. And his explanation of corners, just the number of corners there are and the number of portal corners there are, that it is not as condensed as it is in the NFL with the talent and the pool of money. So if you can evaluate a guy and you can steal a guy, you can steal a corner that's an elite corner, as opposed to quarterback, edge rusher, players in positions that we obviously know the talent level, and everyone agrees Luke Wafel is, the next good edge rusher. Like, he's the next thing at that position. And so you miss on those players, and you can see, like, Penn State tried to double down in how they were building the team around the positions they were winning at, and that is where they struggled. That's where they struggled. Like, receiver, you could just make it about the numbers, and it's about more than that. Like, it extends beyond that. But one of the problems they couldn't do a quick fix was they could not spend in the portal to find the guy, and when they did, whiffed. Just hard whiff on receivers in the portal, which is interesting because receivers should be like corners. There should be so many of them. And it was just such a hard miss.
It's just like Pete said, some of them are depth guys.
Yeah. And so, like, I think Penn State has done a good job, my opinion. Penn State has done a good job of bringing talent in the program via Iowa State that I think elevates this program, and they kept the guys that they thought were valuable to keep that fit within their scheme and their system. So they're, I think, in a good position right now, but when it comes to receiver, like Jameer Dean, right? So they evaluated that guy, and I know Penn State fans are mad every time we talk about him because they're like, just shut up. Stop talking about him because it's going to drive the price up. But, like, it's already there. Right. Georgia already knows about him. He's already got an OV set. So all of these factors are very obvious once you just give those numbers, and that's why I wanted to have Pete on the show to just lay it out. Like, this is what's going on in recruiting, and this is why your favorite receiver is maybe not coming to Penn State.
Yeah, you talk about hidden gems, one of the title topics of today's show. Guess what? There's a guy like Dean out there who might be seen as a hidden gem. Somebody finds out, somebody will find out. That's good recruiting going on all over the country. And then you start having to deal with the price points. I dropped Pete's article that was referenced throughout the interview into the comments here. You can follow Pete Nakos on Twitter at Pete Nakos, PETENAKOS. Appreciate him being with us on today's BWI Live. All right, let's get the best bet, Steve Frank.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
Time for best bets from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up yet for BetMGM, use bonus code ON3, capital O, capital N, number 3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3. Again, it's capital O, capital N, number 3 when you sign up. The NBA Conference Finals are here with 2 great matchups. You can be part of the playoff action when you bet with boosted odds. Activate your Odds Boost token for any bet on the NBA playoffs, and you'll receive a bigger payout if your bet wins. Get ready for tip-off with BetMGM. All right, let's talk about an area of expertise for T. Frank, the NBA Conference Finals. They are underway. The Thunder and Spurs are back in action for Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals this evening. San Antonio had a tremendous Game 1 to beat the Thunder back on, I believe it was Monday night. So here we go. My 2 best bets today, pretty simple. I'm going to go to Oklahoma City to cover 6.5 against the Spurs tonight. So they have to win by 7 or more to cover that bet in Game 2. I just don't. San Antonio threw almost everything at Oklahoma City, and they did beat them, but I think OKC bounces back tonight, especially after getting back into the swing of things. And then we talked about the odds boost token. Well, BetMGM also has a first minute boost. So at plus 140 odds, yes, for both teams to score in the first minute of the game. I'm going to give that a swing as well in tonight's NBA Western Conference Finals between Oklahoma City and San Antonio. So That's best bets for this week, T. Frank, and we will get your NBA thoughts maybe next week. We'll do that, or the NHL.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Oh,
We'll wait and
darn.
see.
We ran out of time.
Yeah, that's best bets from BetMGM.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
Fun show today, BWI Live for Wednesday, May 20th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. T. Frank is back tomorrow with the guys for the latest BWI recruiting show. T. Frank, we covered a lot today, hidden gems in recruiting, some NIL talk, some anonymous head coach quotes from coach quotes about Penn State from across the Big Ten. Of course, tremendous thanks again to Pete Nakos, On3 national college football reporter and insider, for joining the show today. Final thoughts as we wrap up here on one of the last shows of the month, the second to last Wednesday show anyway, for BWI Live in May.
Yeah. The thing I told you last night when we were talking about stuff for the site is that I have this idea I've been trying to get to. It's just going to take a lot of time and research, and I got to prove what I'm saying. So basically the theory is Matt Campbell's
you need to get Pete's brother on the line. He's going to be doing that a lot in his new career field.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I build everything like a defense attorney because, like, you know, the internet exists and everyone's going to come and tell you you're wrong about what you're saying. I'm interested in how Matt Campbell seems to find a lot of guys that have been in championship games in their high school careers. I noticed there's a lot of them. And so I need to go and look at what the percentage actually is. And then if I can, see how it compares to previous Penn State staffs. Because I think, like what I said, this staff wants guys that are good at football. They don't want athletes that project. They want athletes who are good at football. They want both of those things. And if it means taking somebody who is not the EST, biggest, tallest, fastest, they will allow for some of those things. Landon Bloom might not be the fastest guy in the world, but he's got a lot of things going for him. And so I want to prove that. I want to go and I want to find that information of, like, what's the DNA of this class. That's kind of what I'm thinking about, what I'm trying to write. So who knows if I'm going to get to it, because we got a lot of stuff coming up.
A lot of stuff going on, the latest recruiting intel, the latest team news, everything else you want to know about Penn State football and Penn State athletics is over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Join for $1 and then it's 50% off your first year. We'll be hanging out over there the rest of today. T. Frank is back on Thursday with the BWI Live recruiting show, and we'll be back next week. For Thomas Frank Carr, I'm Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you at bluewhiteillustrated.com and back here again then. Talk to you soon.